I turned into my driveway expecting silence, and instead found the worst break-in attempt I'd seen since my law enforcement days. 3 fake HOA inspectors, 1 crowbar, 1 cheap vest still wearing its store tag, and absolutely 0 brain cells between them. They were halfway through my garage door when I pulled up. I wasn't gone more than 30, maybe 35 minutes at most. All I needed was a compression fitting, a roll of fiber conduit, and a half-decent espresso from the only cafe in town that didn't taste like burned plastic. Just a quick trip, nothing out of the ordinary. And as I headed back home, I remember thinking, it's going to be a quiet afternoon. The kind of quiet only 10 acres of pine and dry Colorado wind can give you. Out here, silence isn't a luxury. It's a companion. So, when I eased off the main road, flicked on my turn signal, and rolled onto my gravel drive, I expected the same stillness I'd had for years. But life doesn't always hand you stillness. Sometimes it hands you 3 idiots in fluorescent vests trying to break into your off-grid garage. My first clue wasn't even visual. It was the sound, the faint clank of metal on metal, carried on the wind as my tires crunched over the gravel. A sloppy, irregular rhythm, like someone trying to pry open a can they had no business touching. Then I saw them. One man, tall, helmet too shiny to have ever been worn for real work, standing with his feet planted wide, prying a crowbar under the corner of my garage door like he was opening a treasure chest. Another wore a neon vest so new the price tag flapped in the breeze, hanging loose from the seam. He was holding a cheap clipboard, though he clearly didn't know what to do with it. And the third, thin as a fence post, was holding up his phone, recording like a director working on the world's worst low-budget crime film. They didn't notice me at first. They were too busy whisper shouting at each other, arguing about leverage, complaining about the lock, and stepping on each other's feet. I pulled my truck to a slow stop, engine idling. No reaction, I slipped it into park. Still nothing. That's when I started to laugh, not loud, just one of those disbelieving chuckles you let out when reality decides to surprise you in the dumbest way possible. I opened my door, stepped out, and called out, "Hey! You boys the matinee show or the evening performance?" That finally got their attention. All 3 froze. Helmet guy nearly dropped the crowbar. Clipboard vest stood up straight like he'd just been caught stealing communion wine. And phone guy turned slow, very slow, like he wanted to pretend I wasn't standing 15 yards away staring right at him. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at one another across the driveway. Me, the rightful owner of the property, and them, the worst break-in crew I'd ever seen. That's when my security drone hummed into view above them, triggered automatically by motion. They didn't see it, but I did. Silent. Watching. Recording everything. And I'll tell you this. In that moment, I realized something important. These weren't just trespassers. They were HOA trespassers, which meant whatever stupidity I was looking at was only the beginning. The 3 of them stood frozen like they'd just realized the universe had made a very unfortunate scheduling error. My driveway, my property, my garage, and them. This wasn't going to end gently. Clipboard Vest tried to recover first. He cleared his throat like he'd practiced this speech in the bathroom mirror. "Sir, this is a routine inspection, HOA protocol. You weren't present to grant access, so under extended jurisdiction, shh." I raised a hand, slow and steady. "Stop, before you injure yourself with that sentence." Phone guy swallowed hard, but kept recording, hand trembling. Helmet guy? He didn't tremble. No, he doubled down. The kind of man who gets more confident the more wrong he is. So, I laid out the rules. You have 15 seconds to explain why you're forcing entry into my off-grid garage, on my land, without cause, without paperwork, without authority, before this stops being a polite conversation. I glanced at the time, and that's when Helmet Guy made his mistake. He shifted his footing, tightened his grip on the crowbar, and raised it, not high enough to look dramatic, but high enough to be actionable. That wasn't fear, that wasn't confusion, that was intent. I exhaled once, calm as snowmelt. Then I moved. I hooked his wrist, twisted hard and fast, and drove him into the gravel with enough force to knock the wind out of him. The crowbar clattered away, bouncing once before settling near the tire track. Clipboard Vest panicked and lunged, but panic never improves technique. He tripped over his own boots, hit the dirt with a dull whoomp, and stayed there wheezing like a broken accordion. Phone guy spun on his heel to run. 2 steps. 3. Then he forgot the shovel leaning against my woodshed. His shin found it first. Gravity handled the rest. In under a minute, the whole battlefield went quiet. I stepped back, checked hands, pockets, belts. Old habits never die, and confirmed none of them had a blade or a hidden tool within reach. Then I walked to the back of my truck, flipped open the side compartment, and reached into the emergency kit I keep in every vehicle I own. Heavy-duty zip ties, the kind contractors use, the kind that don't break unless you want them to. One by one, I zip-tied their wrists, not tight enough to injure, just tight enough to keep stupidity contained. Helmet guy groaned as I rolled him onto his side. "You're fine," I said. The gravel did most of the work. Clipboard Vest muttered something about miscommunication. Phone guy whimpered, "Karen said this was authorized. She said he keeps dangerous stuff in there." There it was. The missing puzzle piece with lipstick and a board member badge. I took out my phone and dialed Sheriff Bell. "Sheriff, it's Trent. I've got 3 individuals on my property attempting forced entry into my garage." A pause. "Negative on me drawing any weapon, but I do have an assault with a deadly weapon on tape. Crowbar, raised and ready." Another pause. "Yeah. They're zip-tied, they're breathing, and no, they're not going anywhere." When I hung up, I walked over to my porch cooler, sat down, and let out a slow breath. Helmet guy groaned. Clipboard Vest whimpered. Phone guy tried to avoid eye contact with my drone, still hovering above like an impatient judge. And I thought to myself, if this is Karen's opening move, then the war she just started is going to be one hell of a story. Sheriff Bell's cruiser rolled up my driveway about 8 minutes later. Sirens off, lights turning slow, steady circles across the pines. Bell moved the way only seasoned lawmen do, calm, deliberate, with the quiet patience of a man who's filled out more incident reports than birthdays. He stepped out, took one long look at the 3 men zip-tied on the gravel, and sighed the kind of sigh you only develop after 30 years in uniform. "Well," he said, nudging the crowbar with the toe of his boot, "looks like your afternoon went sideways." I shrugged. It had potential, but they ruined the quiet part. Bell circled them slowly, kneeling beside Helmet Guy. "You injured?" he asked. Helmet Guy wheezed. "Just wind knocked out." "Good, means you can talk." Bell nodded as he stood. Then he turned to me. No anger, no judgment, just that professional squint of a man already imagining the paperwork. "Trent," he said quietly, "if this man hadn't raised that crowbar the way he did, I'd be talking to you about the zip ties. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Oh, I know. I don't enjoy wrestling grown men on my driveway, Sheriff." He grunted. "Noted." Clipboard Vest suddenly tried to sit up straighter. "Sheriff, sir, this was an authorized HOA safety inspection. We had reports of hazardous materials in that garage. Chemicals, lithium stacks, fumes, maybe even explosive." Bell blinked once, slowly. "Explosive devices," he repeated flatly. Clipboard Vest swallowed. "Well, that's what she told us." I raised my hand from the cooler I'd been sitting on. "Sheriff, the most dangerous thing in that garage is a shop vac older than half the folks in Pine Shadows." Phone guy chimed in, voice cracking. "Karen said if we didn't finish before he got back, the whole community could be in danger. She said he was cooking something." Helmet guy buried his face in the gravel, mortified. Bell exhaled long and deep. "Let me guess," he said. "Karen Litton sent you?" All 3 nodded so hard, I thought the gravel might file their chins down. "Well," Bell muttered, "that explains the IQ level of today's field trip." He turned to me. "You said you've got documented footage?" I held up my phone. Drone caught everything. Doorframe camera too. Time-stamped, synced, archived. They didn't even notice the blinking red light. Bell watched a few seconds of the footage, winced, handed the phone back. "All right, trespass, attempted forced entry, assault with a deadly weapon." He lowered his voice. "And whatever else we dig up once I get statements." Then, because fate has impeccable comedic timing, the next act arrived. The sound came first. A sharp, angry clatter of high heels marching over gravel. each step landing like an accusation. Karen Litton erupted from between the oaks, sunglasses oversized, folder fat enough to stun livestock, expression sharpened to a lethal point. She didn't walk so much as descend, like a monarch inspecting a peasant uprising. "Sheriff Bell!" she shouted before she was even close. "You need to stop this arrest immediately." Bell didn't turn. He just muttered under his breath, "Here we go!" Karen stormed up, heels punching into the gravel. These men were authorized personnel acting under HOA directive. You are interfering with community governance. Bell raised one calm hand. "Ma'am, these men were caught breaking into a private structure, and Pine Shadows HOA has zero jurisdiction on this parcel." "That is incorrect," she snapped, whipping open her folder. Inside, a freshly printed map that probably finished drying 5 minutes ago. According to zoning proposals from 2019, this land was meant to be included in Pine Shadows territory, meaning we have standing to ensure safety compliance. I stepped in, voice steady. "Karen, drawing lines on a PDF doesn't give you jurisdiction. That's not zoning. That's a delusion with a print button." One deputy covered a laugh. Another didn't bother. Karen pivoted, furious. "This garage has been repeatedly reported for suspicious activity. Chemicals, fumes, dangerous equipment. Residents are concerned." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my server batteries, my fire suppression gear, the drill press?" From the ground, phone guy whispered, "She told us it might be a meth lab." Karen's face drained of color. She hissed through clenched teeth. "That was internal speculation regarding community safety. It was not intended for public discussion." Bell stepped between us. "All right, enough. Ma'am, you are on private property without cause, and you orchestrated an unlawful entry. You take one more step toward that garage, and your name goes on the report with theirs." Silence. The kind that stings. I leaned against my truck, folded my arms, and said calmly, "Save your breath, Karen. You're going to need it for the deposition." Her jaw tightened. Bell signaled his deputies. And just like that, the first real line of this war had been drawn. After the deputies loaded her inspection team into the cruiser, the driveway finally fell quiet. Karen stood there, arms rigid, jaw set, folder trembling just slightly, and beneath all that rage, I caught something else. Fear, not fear of me, fear of losing control. Some people volunteer for an HOA because they want to help their neighborhood. Karen Litton volunteered because she wanted a kingdom. And the truth behind that break-in didn't start today. It started months earlier. I'd begun renovating my off-grid garage that spring. New conduit, better insulation, server racks, a fire suppression system. Basic things for someone in my line of work. Nothing sneaky, nothing illegal, just the quiet, methodical satisfaction of building something right. But in a community like Pine Shadows, curiosity spreads faster than common sense. Neighbors asked me simple questions. "What are you working on out there, Trent?" "Some kind of tech setup?" "You building a generator?" I answered honestly. Most nodded politely and went on with their lives. Karen didn't ask me anything. She asked everyone else. And every answer she gathered came back rearranged. A lithium battery became a volatile chemical unit. A fire suppression tank became pressurized hazardous material. A server rack became military-grade communications equipment. And late-night work sessions. Those became strange mechanical noises at suspicious hours. Karen didn't spread rumors, she structured them. She let a few words drip into social gatherings. She expressed concerns at HOA meetings. She forwarded secondhand comments to the board with phrases like, "resident anxiety increasing, potential risk to community safety, unverified reports of fumes or runoff." Soon enough, people began whispering behind my back. "Something's going on in that garage. He's got equipment running all night. You know he used to be law enforcement. Maybe he's hiding something. I heard he's storing hazardous chemicals." I heard worse. And by midsummer, the phrase meth lab started popping up. Always quietly, always behind closed doors, but always conveniently near Karen. One old neighbor pulled me aside at the gas station. "Trent, I don't believe what they're saying," he whispered, "but you should know. Karen told the board your garage might blow up." I laughed at first, thought it was typical HOA melodrama. But the tone shifted. Parents hurried their kids past my driveway. Folks who used to wave now avoided eye contact. And then, Pine Shadows HOA sent out a general safety memo urging residents to report unusual smells, electrical surges, odd lighting, or suspicious equipment noises near boundary-adjacent lots. Boundary-adjacent, like mine. Karen didn't need to name me. She'd already painted the picture. By the end of summer, she had convinced herself, and a good portion of Pine Shadows, that my garage wasn't a workshop. It was a threat. But one question lingered. If she truly believed I was dangerous, running a meth lab, storing explosive materials, why didn't she call the county, or the fire department, or anyone with real jurisdiction? Why send 3 HOA volunteers with a crowbar? The answer finally clicked into place. Karen didn't want the law involved. Karen wanted my land. Those rumors weren't about danger. They were about engineering a justification. That map she waved in the sheriff's face, the freshly printed one, I'd seen earlier drafts months prior, slipped into HOA newsletters as conceptual expansion zones. Every draft had something in common, a dotted line that crept a little farther each time, until it swallowed a strip of my acreage. The county had rejected Pine Shadow's expansion proposal 3 times. But if Karen could prove a public safety emergency on my property, if she could stage an inspection to document violations, if she could show the HOA was forced to intervene, then she might convince the county to fold my parcel into Pine Shadows for safety oversight. She didn't break in because she hated me. She broke in because she needed evidence, real or fabricated, to support a land grab. Everything she'd done, the whispers, the safety memos, the nighttime drone she didn't think I'd notice, was leading to this moment. Karen didn't want to protect Pine Shadows. Karen wanted to expand it, and my land, my garage, my peace, stood in her way. I've never liked courtrooms. Too many fluorescent lights trying to replace sunlight. Too many polished benches pretending to be comfortable. But on the morning of my civil hearing against Pine Shadows HOA, I walked in with one goal, not just to win, but to make the judge enjoy ruling in my favor. The place was packed, neighbors, HOA members, the concerned citizen types who thrive on other people's conflict. You could practically feel the gossip vibrating in the air. I took my seat next to my attorney, Melinda Crowley, a woman carved entirely out of discipline and steel. She slid a stack of files to me, tabbed, color-coded, indexed. "You ready?" I asked. She didn't look up. I was ready before they even filed. That's why I hired her. A few minutes later, Karen Litton entered the room. Not walking, marching, chin high, spine stiff, blazer sharper than her attitude. She radiated the confidence of someone who had never lost a single argument, likely because she simply rewrote history in her own head. Beside her was the HOA attorney, all clean-shaven, suit pressed, hair perfect. The look of a man who prepares thoroughly, but clearly had not prepared for Karen. He whispered something to her. She nodded like a queen approving a battle plan. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Judge Margaret Langford entered, sharp eyes, sharper mind, the kind of judge who could smell nonsense from the parking lot. She glanced around the packed room. Let's remember this is a civil hearing, not a community performance. I expect order. I swear she looked directly at Karen when she said performance. The HOA attorney opened. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth, "my clients acted out of reasonable concern for public safety. They received multiple reports alleging hazardous materials in Mr. West's garage, flammables, chemicals, potential explosive risk. They proceeded with an inspection in good faith." Karen nodded furiously like she was trying to shake off responsibility and agree with it at the same time. Then came Melinda's turn. She rose calmly, as if gravity itself respected her. "Your Honor, before we address the claims, we'd like to establish jurisdiction." She handed the clerk a bound set of documents. "This parcel is not, has never been, and was never approved to become part of Pine Shadows HOA. The HOA had zero authority to inspect anything on Mr. West's land." Judge Langford read the first page and nodded once. "Proceed." Melinda plugged in a thumb drive. "This," she said, "is drone footage from the date in question." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen lit up. There they were. The 3 stooges of Pine Shadows, helmet guy prying like he was opening buried treasure, clipboard vest pacing in confusion, phone guy filming like a shaky-handed YouTuber. Then the audio played. If we don't finish before he gets back, Karen said she'll have our asses. A collective gasp swept the crowd, and the HOA attorney froze. His shoulders sagged, he closed his eyes, and then, subtle but unmistakable, he pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled the long, tragic breath of a man realizing he's defending a client who is absolutely guilty and catastrophically stupid. You could almost hear his soul whisper, "Why me?" Karen, meanwhile, sat perfectly still, jaw clenched hard enough to crack enamel. Melinda continued gently, almost kindly. This wasn't an inspection, it was a break-in, and it was directed, explicitly, by Mrs. Litton. The HOA attorney attempted a pivot. "Your Honor, the intent of Pine Shadow's 2019 zoning proposal clearly—" Judge Langford cut him off before he could finish. "Intent is irrelevant. Intent does not create jurisdiction." She turned her attention to Karen. "Mrs. Litton, did you authorize these individuals to enter Mr. West's garage?" Karen swallowed. "I relayed resident concerns. They acted based on community necessity." The judge leaned forward. "That is not an answer." Karen shifted. "I informed them the HOA expected decisive action." Next to me, Melinda whispered, "That's it." She handed us the verdict. Judge Langford set her pen down with a soft click. "I find Pine Shadow's HOA and Mrs. Karen Litton jointly liable for trespass, unauthorized intrusion, and willful abuse of positional authority." Karen's attorney closed his eyes again. The judge continued, "Actual damages are minimal, but punitive damages for this willful abuse of power and disregard for property rights will be significant." She paused for dramatic and judicial effect. "The HOA is ordered to pay Mr. West $85,000 in punitive damages." A wave of murmurs swept across the room. "And Mrs. Litton," the judge added, turning her gaze like a laser sight, "is required to issue a public apology, unedited and approved by the court, to be posted on all HOA communication platforms for no fewer than 60 days. You could almost hear every molecule of dignity evacuating Karen's body. She didn't look furious, she looked exposed. And people like Karen don't forget humiliation. They feed on it. And then they try to return the favor. You'd think winning $85,000 in punitive damages would feel like a victory. And for about 2 days, it did. But peace on my land has a sound, a rhythm, a certain clean quiet that settles between the pines like a quilt. And the week after the hearing did not sound like peace. It sounded like a pause, a held breath, a dangerous kind of silence. Karen vanished, not physically, her Lexus still came and went, but she disappeared from community life entirely. No HOA newsletters, no late-night mass emails, no rants on the neighborhood forum, not even her signature concerned citizen alerts about trash cans being left out 20 minutes too long. Nothing. Like she'd fallen off the face of the earth. And that was the first red flag. People like Karen don't retreat. They reload. The second red flag came 2 days later. I spotted a white SUV parked just outside my southern fence line. No markings, tinted windows. It sat there for maybe 10 minutes. 2 people stepped out. Not neighbors, not locals. Didn't wave, didn't introduce themselves. They didn't approach my fence or address me. They just pointed lenses at my solar array, snapped pictures, then drove off without a word. I watched them leave with a feeling I hadn't felt in years. The low, cold tickle of someone probing for weakness. On day 4, a letter arrived. A very official-looking envelope from the Colorado Department of Environmental Health. Heavy paper, government seal, printed neatly, sounded legitimate. The contents, a report alleging non-compliant emissions, possible chemical runoff, and solar energy feedback irregularities. Every accusation was nonsense, but it was nonsense written in bureaucratic language crafted to intimidate. I exhaled slowly. There it was. Karen's next move. She had realized she couldn't beat me on property law, so now she was aiming for regulatory warfare. Attack the man through his systems, through paperwork, through agencies that don't know they're being used as pawns. Classic HOA guerrilla tactics. The inspector who eventually arrived, a polite woman in her 50s, looked almost embarrassed being there. She toured my place, took notes, checked every battery, pipe, sensor, and runoff trench. After 30 minutes, she sighed. "Mr. West, I have no idea why this complaint was filed. Everything here is immaculate." I nodded. "I know why it was filed." She didn't ask for details, smart woman, but as she left, she gave me a look I recognized from my law enforcement days. "You're not being inspected. You're being targeted." By the 5th day, I knew the truth. Karen wasn't licking her wounds. She was regrouping. She'd tried to steal my land. She'd tried to get her stooges to break in. She'd tried to twist zoning law. And now, she was weaponizing the state. The silence wasn't peace. It was the prelude, the soft drum roll before the next strike. And deep down, under all the calm and all the stillness, I felt it in my bones. Karen wasn't done, not even close. The week after the environmental inspector left, I expected the dust to settle, but nothing settled. It shifted. The silence around Pine Shadows wasn't peace. It was pressure, the kind that builds before a storm finally breaks loose. And Karen Litton, well, she wasn't finished. She was just changing weapons. The anonymous letters showed up first. Not in my mailbox, in everyone else's. Neighbors blocks away began receiving cream-colored envelopes with no return address. Inside were grainy, zoomed-in night photos of my workshop. Blurry by design, suspicious on purpose. Below the photos was a single typed line. "Do you know what's being stored in your neighborhood?" No signature, no explanation, just fear, delivered postage paid. By the end of the week, people were behaving differently. A little more distance, a little more hurry in their step. One family that used to let their kids ride bikes near my place suddenly started walking them the long way around. Head down, quick pace, no wave. That's how rumor works. It doesn't need truth, just oxygen. And Karen was fanning it hard. Then the flyers appeared in HOA mailboxes. Same photos, same spooky aesthetic. But this time, the rumors got specific. Possible unlicensed chemicals on premises. Electrical anomalies near boundary zone. Reports of hazardous equipment. Every line written to sound official, but vague enough that no one could challenge it. It was a classic HOA tactic. Turn an ordinary property into a neighborhood issue. And it was working. 3 days later, the real punch landed. An HOA Facebook group post titled, "Disturbing Confrontation Caught on Video. Pine Shadows Residents Beware." The thumbnail froze me mid-motion, jaw tight, shoulders squared. The kind of freeze frame that makes anyone look guilty. I tapped play, and I recognized the footage immediately. Not because it was from my cameras, but because I had stood directly in front of that lens. Phone guy. The shaky-handed amateur Spielberg from part 1. It was his video. Spliced, trimmed, weaponized. The first half, where they were breaking into my garage, was gone, cut clean. Every piece showing their forced entry, their tools, their intent, gone. What remained was a stitched-together clip of me taking them down, framed like I was some unhinged aggressor ambushing innocent inspectors. Worse, someone had added a voiceover, deep, grainy, fake, saying, "Come back again and there will be consequences." I never said that, not once. But in the edited footage, synced badly with the movement of my jaw, it looked real enough for the uninformed. The comments exploded. "He's dangerous. I heard he used to be military. This is scary. Why does he have so much equipment? Could be a prepper, or worse." I checked the metadata. The upload came from a fresh account. 0 friends, 0 posts made the day before. But the proxy bounce was sloppy. It passed through a dorm network. CSU Pueblo, Tyler Litton's school. Karen hadn't just escalated, she'd enlisted family. And then, the drones arrived. Not my quiet, thermal, steady surveillance drone. No. These were cheap, buzzing little insects flown by someone with the coordination of a drunk carpenter. They dipped low over my western fence, circled my roofline, hovered over tree cover just long enough to be noticed. Twice, I launched my own drone. Twice, the intruder panicked and bolted south like a scared quail. Back inside, I checked my firewall logs. 5 pings. all from unknown devices, all probing the perimeter of my network. It was amateur work, but persistent. Whoever was trying to spy on me wasn't just curious, they were desperate. The final warning shot came on a quiet Tuesday at 2:14 a.m. My motion alarm beeped. I checked the camera feed and saw two silhouettes slipping through the tree line at my back fence. They carried something small, boxy, mounted it onto a trunk facing my garage, stayed 5 minutes, left silently. By dawn, the device was gone, but the zip tie remained, and the footprints, sloppy, careless, but escalating. Standing in that morning light, looking at those prints, I knew one thing. Karen wasn't simply angry about losing in court. She was obsessed. And she wasn't just spreading rumors. She was assembling a campaign, digital, social, psychological, a machine built from fear, ignorance, and weaponized gossip. She wanted a war. She had just fired the first real shot. The morning after I found the zip tie and footprints along my back fence, I brewed a pot of strong coffee, sat in my workshop, and did what I've always done when someone pushes too far. I started digging, not into dirt, into data. Most folks in Pine Shadows only knew me as that off-grid tech guy with too many batteries and not enough HOA spirit. They had no idea that before building servers for a living, I spent a near decade in rapid deployment law enforcement, handling high-risk cyber physical incidents. I wasn't some hobbyist with a firewall. I used to train people on how to break into fortresses, and how to keep fortresses unbreakable, which is why when I opened my network logs and saw repeating pattern probes coming from rotating IP ranges, I didn't panic. I recognized them. Cheap, messy, off-the-shelf malware traffic. A botnet. A bottom tier one. The kind teenagers rent for $9.99 to impress friends or crash gaming servers. But this wasn't a kid messing around. Someone was trying to penetrate my system. The attempts came in clusters, 5 a night, 10 the next, sometimes 20. Every signature traced to a different hijacked machine somewhere on the internet. But the command and control pulse, that was the interesting part. It came from a mobile device routed through Colorado, and occasionally jumped to a college network IP block. CSU Pueblo, Tyler, Karen's son. The same genius who helped edit the smear video now thought he was a cyber criminal. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and exhaled. They were escalating again. And this time, they were stepping onto my turf. I traced Tyler's digital footprints the same way I'd track someone on a snowy field. Quietly, methodically, following disturbances he didn't know he'd left. Packet timestamps, behavior signatures, heartbeat intervals from his botnet controller. Even sloppy criminals have rhythms. Tyler had the rhythm of a drunk woodpecker. After 30 minutes of analysis, I could tell exactly when he clicked run attack, exactly when he stopped, exactly when he panicked and switched VPNs. Amateurs think VPNs make them invisible. Professionals know VPNs only hide amateurs. I gathered everything. Timestamps, flow logs, packet captures, malware signatures, and packaged it neatly. Then I made a call, not to the sheriff, not to the county, to someone else entirely, a retired colleague from my rapid deployment days, now consulting quietly for the FBI's cyber division. He answered on the second ring. "Trent, it's been a while. Got something you might want to look at." "Is it legal?" I chuckled. "It's data. Data doesn't break laws. People do." He sighed. "Send it." I transmitted a sanitized evidence bundle. No names, no location, no context, just the raw network activity. He said, "Give me an hour." It took him 20 minutes. He called back, voice tighter now. "Where did you get this?" Hypothetically. Someone tried poking into my network. I poked back. He exhaled sharply. "Trent, this botnet is already under federal surveillance." I sat up straighter. "Explain?" "We've been tracking this particular botnet for months. It's used by a criminal group we've been trying to pin down. Credit card skimming, ransomware deployment, crypto laundering, the works. And now Tyler rented it like a toy." "Exactly, which means whoever sent these attack pulses from Colorado," his voice hardened, "they just stepped directly into an active federal investigation." I rubbed my forehead. "So what happens now?" Now, he said. We escalate, quietly. Send me the unredacted version. I hesitated. You sure? If your attacker is involved with this botnet in any capacity, even accidentally, the Bureau needs to know. This isn't HOA nonsense. This is federal jurisdiction. So, I sent him everything, and within 24 hours, 3 things happened. 1. My friend forwarded the evidence chain to the local cybercrime task force. 2. The task force opened a preliminary case file on unlawful digital intrusion originating from Pine Shadows Village and CSU Pueblo. 3. Tyler's world started cracking. Because that same afternoon, a federal agent contacted the university's IT department, requesting logs for several devices on Tyler's dorm floor. Nothing publicly visible yet, but the gears had started turning, and once federal gears start moving, they don't stop easily. Meanwhile, Pine Shadows residents were still buzzing about the edited video, the flyers, the whispers. Karen thought she was tightening the noose around me. She didn't realize she'd just slipped the rope around her own neck. Because the botnet attacks, the edited video, the flyers, the late-night surveillance attempts, they weren't isolated acts. They were a coordinated harassment campaign. And when you tie digital crime to real-world intrusion, you move from civil court into criminal court. 2 days later came the moment I knew the tide had officially turned. My friend called again. Trent, the botnet traffic routed through a misconfigured proxy node that piggybacks on a federal data subcontractor. What does that mean? It means the attacker, your boy Tyler, accidentally sent illegal packets through a government-associated endpoint. I closed my eyes. Oh, hell. Yeah, that's a breach of federal network policy. Automatic red flag. And because of the existing investigation, the Cyber Task Force now has probable cause to dig into every digital move tied to that device. So, Karen escalated this into a federal case. She didn't escalate, he corrected. She detonated. I sat there in the quiet of my workshop, listening to the low hum of my servers. Karen wanted to smear me, embarrass me, bully me off my land. She thought she could rewrite the narrative, edit the footage, control the gossip, and weaponize her son. But she didn't know the rules she was playing with. She didn't understand that when you fling digital mud, it leaves digital fingerprints. She didn't realize she'd formed a trail that the FBI was now following. Straight to her front door. The HOA queen had crossed a line no clipboard, no committee, no neighborhood gossip could save her from. There are battles you pick. There are battles you start. And then there are battles where you don't realize the other side is armed with training, experience, and federal allies. This wasn't HOA territory anymore. This was federal terrain, and Karen had just trespassed on the wrong system. The knock came at 6:02 a.m., not on my door, on Karen's. Pine Shadows Village woke up to the sound of federal agents before they heard their first coffee makers click on. Out here, news doesn't travel by word of mouth. It travels by panic. By 6:15 a.m., 3 different neighbors had already driven past my road by accident, slowing down just enough to see whether I knew something. I didn't wave, I didn't gloat. I just leaned on my porch railing, mug in hand, watching the sky turn from steel blue to soft gold. My phone buzzed. A message from my FBI contact. It's underway. Keep your distance. By 7 a.m., the HOA Facebook group had morphed into a digital wildfire. Does anyone know why there are federal vehicles outside Karen's home? I saw them carrying out computers. Is this a raid? Someone posted a blurry photo of 2 agents removing evidence boxes. The caption read, "This is serious." Even through a low-resolution cell phone lens, you could spot the panic on Karen's lawn, her Lexus in the driveway, her son Tyler sitting on the curb, head in his hands. Karen pacing, no heels today, just fury, confusion, and mascara smudged like war paint. At 7:40 a.m., the first audio leaked, a whispered voice. They took her computer and her son's laptop and a stack of HOA files, like 5 inches thick. Another voice replied, "She was screaming about being the HOA president. The agent told her, 'Not today, you're not.'" I didn't smile. Justice shouldn't taste sweet, but accountability, that's different. At 8:10 a.m., HOA Treasurer Raymond Brewer pulled into my driveway. He didn't even kill the engine before he stepped out, rubbing his temples like a man carrying his own gravestone. "Trent," he said, voice heavy, we have a problem." I handed him a cup of coffee. He took it with both hands like it was the only warm thing left in his life. "They questioned me," he said. "Agents. They showed me charges on the HOA credit card, ones I didn't authorize, ones no one authorized." I stayed silent. Let the man unspool. He swallowed hard. "There were payments, several, to an Arizona marketing firm. That's the company behind the flyers." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" Raymond pulled out a folded piece of paper, shaky printout, highlighted in yellow. "There's also a $5,000 charge to a digital services vendor. But the agent said it's actually a processor connected to botnet rentals." He stared at the paper like it was a confession written in blood. "She used the HOA card, Trent. She funded a cyber attack with HOA money." I let that sink in. Not misuse, not carelessness, embezzlement, wire fraud, cybercrime conspiracy, crimes with teeth, crimes that bite back. By noon, the emergency HOA board meeting was called, closed doors only. But this is Pine Shadows. Nothing stays closed. 20 minutes later, a resident forwarded me the full audio. It began with chaos. Karen's voice, cracked, frantic, but still trying to wear the crown. "This is retaliation. They're twisting everything. I was protecting this community." Raymond cut in, his tone flat, brittle. "Protecting us? You used the HOA credit card to hire a marketing firm to smear Trent, and another $5,000 to fund a botnet to attack his network." Karen gasped. "I didn't know it was illegal." Elena, head of community events, snapped, "You didn't know? Karen, you forged our signatures on the reimbursement form. You listed it as Community Digital Outreach." Someone else muttered, "That's embezzlement." Another voice added, "And wire fraud." A chair scraped loudly. Then Raymond delivered the kill shot. "You didn't just violate HOA policy, Karen. You tied every homeowner in this community to federal cybercrime." Karen's breathing quickened. "You don't understand. Trent is dangerous. He forced us to act." Raymond slammed a binder shut. "No, Karen. You forged documents. You paid criminals. You weaponized your son. And now federal agents are counting the receipts." The room fell silent. Then Elena spoke, steady and cold. "I move for a vote of no confidence." There was no debate, no hesitation. Just a devastating unanimous chorus. Aye, aye, aye. 10 votes, 0 against. Karen Litton was removed as HOA president, not suspended, not temporarily relieved. Removed. And from the way the meeting dissolved into shouting, crying, and panicked footsteps, everyone knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the real unraveling. By sunset, Pine Shadows felt hollow. A neighborhood without its tyrant, a board without a leader. A community suddenly aware that their HOA fees had been used to commit federal crimes. I sat on my porch, the air cooling around me, listening to the cicadas start their nightly choir. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had changed. This wasn't HOA territory anymore. This was federal terrain, and Karen had marched herself, and half the HOA, straight into it with both eyes closed. 2 days after the vote removing Karen, the quiet around Pine Shadows changed again. Not the expectant silence of a coming storm, but the heavy procedural quiet of government machinery beginning to turn. And once that machinery starts moving, it doesn't stop for anyone. Not even an HOA queen. I was working in my shop, replacing old conduit, hands steady, mind clearing, when my phone rang. Unknown number, Colorado area code. I wiped my hands and answered. "This is Trent." A woman spoke, calm, professional, unmistakably trained. "Mr. West, my name is Assistant District Attorney Lynn Morrissey. I'm overseeing the preliminary investigation into the cyber harassment and financial misconduct case involving Pine Shadows HOA. I didn't speak. Let her continue. "We'd like you to come in to provide a formal statement. You are not under investigation. Your cooperation has been noted by federal partners." Federal partners. There it was. I exhaled slowly. "When do you need me?" "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And Mr. West, please bring any digital logs or recordings relevant to the harassment campaign." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, you might want to clear your afternoon." The DA's office sat in a squat brick building in Pueblo, unassuming but buzzing quietly with the seriousness of real work. Ada Morrissey met me in a small conference room, firm handshake, eyes sharp. The kind of person who has no interest in theatrics, only facts. "Mr. West," she began, "I'm going to be direct. We have 3 active threads in this case. 1. Cyber intrusion involving a monitored botnet. 2. Financial misconduct within the HOA, embezzlement and wire fraud. 3. Coordinated harassment, including falsified media and unauthorized surveillance. We believe all 3 connect to Mrs. Karen Litton and her son, Tyler." I nodded, letting her steer the conversation. "Before we proceed," she said, "you should know that Tyler Litton has already retained counsel." I raised an eyebrow. "That didn't take long." "No," she said, "it didn't. And he's talking." That made me pause. Talking, as in folding, melting, cracking under pressure. I leaned back in my chair. "What has he admitted?" She opened a folder thick with printed logs, including ones I recognized from the data I'd given the FBI contact. He admitted to editing the video posted online. No surprise. He admitted to sending flyers and anonymous emails. Still expected. Then she locked eyes with me. "And he admitted to renting the botnet to attack your network. He provided proof, payment records, message logs, everything." I nodded slowly. "Did he mention why?" She sighed. "He says his mother told him to handle the digital side of things, that she pressured him, that he believed helping her would protect the neighborhood." I let that sit in the air, because that was the problem with people like Karen. They didn't just break rules, they broke the people around them. After 3 hours of questioning, methodical, detailed, by the book, I left the DA's office feeling something I hadn't felt since the beginning. Relief. Not victory, not vindication, just relief. Because the truth was now out of my hands and in theirs. Trained hands, steady hands, hands that didn't care who Karen thought she was. Back in Pine Shadows, the neighborhood looked like a place holding its breath. Half the board had resigned, the rest were meeting with attorneys. HOA fees were frozen, the community newsletter was suspended, and the most telling sign of all, the HOA sign at the subdivision entrance, the one Karen had insisted be repainted every spring, leaned crooked on one bracket, half unscrewed. No one rushed to fix it. Power collapses quietly. That evening, I got a message from Raymond. They served Karen with preliminary charges today. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then the next one came. ADA says more charges are coming. Tyler signed a cooperation agreement. So he'd broken completely. I don't blame him. Pressure cracks weaker steel. And Tyler was never forged for this kind of heat. The last message arrived a few minutes later. Federal agents want HOA financial records from the past 5 years. We don't look good, Trent. Karen hid a lot. That didn't surprise me. Power built on lies always sinks under its own weight. At sunset, I stood at the edge of my property, watching the sky bleed orange across the tree line. For the first time in months, I felt the air shift. Lighter, cleaner. The fight wasn't done. But the battlefield had changed. The HOA wasn't my enemy anymore. The law had taken that mantle. And Karen, well, she had finally collided with something she couldn't guilt trip, manipulate, or bully: reality. And reality has a perfect memory. Federal courtrooms don't try to intimidate you. They don't need to. The ceilings are higher. The silence is heavier. The stakes hang in the air like the weight of a loaded verdict. When I walked into the federal district courthouse in Denver for Karen's arraignment and pre-trial hearings, the room wasn't buzzing like the HOA civil court had been. There were no whispers, no gossipers, no curious neighbors. Federal court is a different animal. Here, people don't show up for drama. They show up because consequences are real. And Karen was about to learn what real consequences look like. When Karen entered the courtroom, she looked like someone had drained the color from her world. Gone was the sharp blazer, the curated hairstyle, the jewelry she used to weaponize as status symbols. She wore a plain beige suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a tight, nervous knot. She didn't walk like a queen anymore. She walked like someone trying not to fall apart. Her attorneys, 2 of them now, flanked her like handlers for a wounded prizefighter. Behind them was Tyler, accompanied by his own lawyer, head down, shoulders slumped, a ghost of the cocky college kid who once edited smear videos to impress his mother. He didn't look at her, not once. When the judge entered, the Honorable Judge Evelyn Dwyer, the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. She wasted no time. "This court is convened for the arraignment of Mrs. Karen Litton," she said. "Charges include..." And then came the list, count after count, a waterfall of legal language crashing over Karen like a cold tide. Wire fraud, embezzlement of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit digital harassment, coordinated cyber intrusion through illicit botnet, unauthorized surveillance of a private citizen, tampering with digital evidence, attempted coercion of witnesses, and one that made the entire court stiffen. Violation of federal network security policy by proxy, routing through a protected subsystem. Tyler visibly shrank when that one was read. When the list finally ended, Karen was trembling. Her lawyer whispered, "Stay calm." But she looked like someone had just read her obituary out loud. Then came the evidence presentation. The prosecution began with what they called the digital trail, a clean chronological breakdown of every action Karen and Tyler took. The HOA card transactions, payments to the Arizona media firm, botnet rental receipts, fake profile creation, drone activity logs, edited smear video timelines, anonymous letter print records. The detective from the Cyber Task Force explained how Tyler used a misconfigured proxy node touching a federal subsystem. A man in the gallery audibly whispered, "Oh, he's cooked." And he wasn't wrong. Karen clenched her jaw each time her son's actions were read aloud. But she couldn't defend him, not without implicating herself further. The digital forensics agent ended with a simple sentence. This was not an accident. It was a coordinated harassment campaign. Then came the moment that cracked the courtroom open. Prosecution calls Mr. Tyler Litton to the stand. Karen's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide, panicked. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder. Tyler stood slowly, walked to the witness stand, and sat down with the posture of someone who'd barely slept in weeks. The oath was given. He answered quietly, and then the prosecutor asked, "Mr. Litton, did your mother instruct you to participate in a digital campaign targeting Mr. Trent West?" Tyler swallowed. She told me to handle the online stuff. She said he was dangerous. She said the whole neighborhood needed to see him that way." "And did you believe her?" "At first," his voice cracked. "I just wanted her to stop yelling. She said if I loved her, I'd help." "You created the anonymous accounts?" "Yes." "You edited the video?" "Yes." "You rented the botnet?" A long pause. Then, "Yes." "And who paid for it?" Another pause. Then Tyler closed his eyes. "She used the HOA card." Karen gasped, sharp, involuntary, like a wound splitting open. "No, Tyler, no, that's not..." Her lawyer placed a firm hand on her arm. "Mrs. Litton, do not speak." But it was too late. The courtroom had heard enough. The prosecution rested. Karen's lawyers scrambled, tried blaming confusion, mental stress, misinformation, misinterpretation of HOA duties. But federal courts don't run on sympathy. They run on evidence. And Karen had left a digital footprint so large it could be seen from orbit. Then came the final blow. The prosecutor presented email records, subpoenaed from Karen's devices, containing her instructions to Tyler and Dennis Mallister. In one email, Karen wrote, "Make people scared of him. Spin it however you need." There was no oxygen left in the room. Not even Karen's lawyers tried to object. Judge Dwyer folded her hands. "Mrs. Litton, this court finds that the evidence overwhelmingly supports the charges laid before you. We will proceed to sentencing at a later date." Karen collapsed back into her seat, small, defeated, finally stripped of the persona she had worn like armor. Tyler wept quietly. He didn't look at her, not once. As the courtroom emptied, I remained seated for a moment, letting the gravity settle. Karen didn't turn toward me. She couldn't. Not anymore. But I didn't hate her. People assume justice means satisfaction. It doesn't. It just means balance restored. And sometimes that balance comes at a price no one sees coming. Karen thought she was orchestrating a neighborhood war. Instead, she started a federal case. And she had just learned, in the hardest possible way, that power without restraint isn't power. It's a fuse. And hers had burned out. A year is a strange measure of time, too short to forget, long enough for things to settle where they belong. And exactly 1 year after Karen's collapse in federal court, Pine Shadows Village looked different, quieter, calmer, like a fever had finally broken. Karen never returned to public life. Her sentencing was modest, 18 months probation, community service, restitution payments, a 5-year ban from holding any HOA or administrative position. But the real punishment wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the silence that followed. The woman who once controlled an entire neighborhood with gossip, intimidation, and weaponized authority now lived 2 towns over in a beige rental house with trimmed hedges and no HOA. She kept to herself. People said she barely spoke in grocery stores. Others said she walked around with her head down, afraid someone would recognize her. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. It wasn't my business anymore. As for Tyler, he didn't stay in Colorado. He moved to New Mexico, started a small landscaping business, manual work, quiet work, honest work. He sent me a message once, a long apology. A sincere one. I never replied. Forgiveness isn't owed, but I didn't carry anger either. Some lessons only life can teach. The HOA? That took longer to fix, but under Raymond Brewer's leadership, Pine Shadows slowly rediscovered something it hadn't experienced in years. Transparency. He opened the books, all 5 years of them. Residents were stunned to see how much money Karen had funneled into community outreach, digital engagement, special projects, code words for her obsessions. Some people were angry, others embarrassed. But when the anger finally faded, something healthier replaced it. Accountability. Pine Shadows rewrote its bylaws from the ground up. Term limits, mandatory audits, budget transparency, anonymous voting, zero unilateral authority for any board member. For the first time, the HOA became what it was meant to be, a community tool, not a weapon. And to my surprise, they invited me to speak at a resident forum on property rights and neighborhood governance. I wore clean jeans and a plain shirt, stood in a room full of people who once crossed the street to avoid me, and told the story. Not to shame them, but to warn them. How fast fear spreads, how easily power corrupts, how important it is to question anyone who claims they know what's best for everyone else. It was the first time Pine Shadows listened with the intention to change. And then came something unexpected. The messages? Dozens, then hundreds from people all over the state. Stories of HOA overreach, coercion, absurd rules, weaponized bureaucracy. I realized my ordeal wasn't unusual. It was common, typical, systemic. So I bought a microphone, built a small recording booth in the back of my shop, and started a podcast. Off the Grid. Stories of property wars and HOA madness. The first 3 episodes were mine. The next ones, they belonged to everyone else. The show took off faster than I imagined. Within 3 months, we were top 10 in legal commentary on Apple Podcasts. Spotify featured us. A lawyer from Texas offered to collaborate on a homeowner defense toolkit. It wasn't fame, it wasn't revenge, it was purpose. A way to turn everything Karen tried to destroy into something useful, something that helped people fight back without losing themselves. My land, still as quiet and honest as the day I bought it. No more drones, no more anonymous letters, no more HOA volunteers in fluorescent vests pretending to be law enforcement. Just pine, dirt, wind, and the clean hum of my workshop at dusk. I added a new layer of thermal cameras, a new firewall, a small motion-triggered speaker system that plays Ode to Joy whenever someone without clearance gets too close. A personal joke. But the best addition wasn't technological. It was a sign. A polished black and gold plaque bolted onto my outer gate. Curious what's in my garage? File an official request. Or ask Karen's lawyer. A little humor, a little truth, a reminder. Not to them, to me, because closure doesn't happen when the enemy falls, or when the courtroom empties, or when the town finally breathes again. Closure happens when you rebuild the parts of your life someone tried to burn. It happens privately, quietly, and often invisibly. Closure isn't a door you close, it's the lock you change.